Hello, if you are watching this video, you are trying to figure out the Death Fugue assignment and specifically begin to create your constructive response. The objective of this assignment is really to illuminate or help you with the analysis, not necessarily the writing. Um, because if you have the analysis, specifically if you completed the figurative language assignment, you should be in a much better place to really think critically about this assignment here. Or about the writing anyway. So what I really wanted to do was just take you through the exemplar, the period B exemplar. They did an incredible job of just analyzing the text. I heard a couple students say, how did you come up with some of your analysis, Ms. Cooper? I wasn't even thinking about this. One thing that I would encourage you to do is, take a moment and look at some scenes in Night that are pretty horrific. So I would encourage you to look at, and maybe horrific is the wrong word, the scenes in Night where Eliza is most impacted. So that would be the first scene in Night when he arrives at the concentration camp and he sees the fire and he sees the babies and adults being killed and he contemplates his own suicide. I would say the second place is definitely pages 66, 67, 65 when he is questioning God. I would definitely say when the papel is hanged and finally, I'm kind of fast forwarding a bit, at the end of the book when his father passes. So those are three or four areas of the text that are most impactful. This is important because when you're reading this poem, Death Fugue by Paul Celan, who was a Holocaust survivor himself, he lost both parents in the Holocaust at the age of 22. Um, he's trying to reconcile his own trauma. In the background information I gave you, you'll read that Paul Celan went on to have an incredible career as a poet, but at the age of 50, he committed suicide. And so we can also see how these memories that he was dealing with impacted him as a human being. So bring all that to bear in this poem because remember, a poem is not necessarily using literal denotative language. It's using figurative or connotative language to explain itself. So if you need to pause now. I'm going to move on. So I'm using period B's annotations because most of these annotations are from them. They did an excellent job of looking at the text, of struggling with the text. It's okay to struggle, of rereading the text. The place where you want to start is actually here where it says about the related reading. Ms. Roberts typed this and actually found this resource, and we were speaking, and this related reading box is so important because it gives you so much background information about the poem. So if you notice here, these are the devices that my students and I found in the poem. Of course, imagery is like a overhanging umbrella for metaphor in a sense. But we definitely see imagery, we see metaphor, and we see repetition. This question here was one that a student, I think Lolita asked, and so she has some homework as well to figure out this. So I want to start in this first section, and you actually have a copy of this. I'm just going through some analysis. And read, like literally read the poem. Death Fugue, black milk of daybreak, we drink it at sundown. We drink it at noon in the morning, we drink it at night. We drink and we drink it. We drink a grave in the breezes, there one lies unconfined. A man lives in the house, he plays with the serpents, he writes. I'm going to stop here for a moment and just send a special shout out to all the people who actually read about the related reading. Be sure you do that. And also for people who took the notes on what a fugue is, it's really important to know what a fugue is in order to have a deeper, I think perhaps Wiesel and where she would call this a Kabbalah or a mystical understanding of this poem, which is where you want to be. So the first question I asked my students was, if we read the poem, if we just read the title of the poem, Death Fugue, what type of mood is conveyed? And so students said scary. I said that there was a frenzy here. Like a fugue, if a fugue, especially if you watch the video, moves up and down in a pattern and it's quick and it's fast, um, then there's a frenzied sort of feeling. There's a hysteria. And if we remember, hysterical is the psychiatric diagnosis of um, of a fugue condition. So that's where we begin. We're immediately dropped into the feeling that perhaps Eliza and maybe even Paul felt when they first arrived um, in a concentration camp, in a work camp. Black milk of daybreak. So the next question I asked my students was, what happens at daybreak? And some people, I think Hasimo said drink coffee. Um, and I said, but what else do we do? Maybe brush our teeth. Okay, so what else do we do? If I'm in a concentration camp, what happens to me at daybreak? I wake up. And usually if I'm waking up, it's loud, it's raucous. Everybody's getting ready because you have to be counted. You have to go to roll call. You have to go to the Appleplatz, to the plaza to be counted. And what do we see in daybreak? Okay, we see the sun, but if we look up and we're at a concentration camp, what do we see? And so Eliza constantly details, or Elie Wiesel details seeing this ash in the sky, seeing the crematoria pumping day and night. So I wrote here, smoke and ash of the crematoria, remembering nightmares. We drink it at sundown. So at sundown, I think Deja and Nina said we return to sleep, and then somebody else said we see the nightmare again. I think that might have been Aeneas. So this is something we cannot escape from. And if you did your figurative language homework, that was actually my exemplar, where on page 35 or 36, he feels like he's trapped, like he and other people in the concentration camp are trapped in this hell, and he wants to send all of this toward oblivion, but there's no hope of finding rest. The next line, we drink it at noon, we drink it at night, we drink and we drink. So we have this repetition. And that's also a part of the fugue, the contrapuntal part where we get this repetition, this building on a note, this joining of voices. So the we, think about who the speakers are in this poem. Who is the we? I'm not going to say, even though it's written here. Then it says, we dig a grave in the breezes. So if we're digging to bury the dead, we have a bit of irony here because the Jews couldn't bury their dead. You were either killed by the Germans and burned. You were, sometimes people did bury, I'm sorry. They had to dig their own ditches, and then they were shot in them and they were covered. They might have dug someone else's ditches and buried them. But it says in the breezes. So what else is in the breezes? Again, we go back to this image of the crematoria pumping day and night. So people are buried in the air. Their ashes are floating out. But then we have someone who's unconfined. And Maxwell said that that means that the person is free. True. You're without any type of bonds. You can go where you want to go. A man lives in the house. He plays with the serpents he writes. So through a series of questions, we have a man in a house. Okay, if we think of serpents, immediately we think of something that's evil. So this symbolizes something evil. It could even symbolize death. And he writes. So let's figure out who the man in the house is first. Somebody said, oh, that's death. Okay, exactly. So who's the person who caused the death of the Jews? So I want to say somebody might have said Dr. Mengele, but I might be mistaken. But someone else said Hitler. True. And if he's writing, what is he writing? What kinds of things is he writing? So he could be writing books. So somebody mentioned the educational texts that he gave to children or that were created and taught to children. Excellent. Someone else said orders and laws, like orders to kill the Jews, laws that made them oppressed in their own countries. So think about anything connected to something that's written that had a devastating impact on the Jews or people who are considered non-Aryan. We also see this as a metaphor, and if we the man is a metaphor, so there's a symbol here, and then it says he plays with serpents, he writes. So we have an image here of a man playing with serpents and writing. I'm gonna briefly explain this point, and then I'm gonna stop and move on to the constructive response writing, and I'm just doing the answer. So be aware, I'm not writing the whole constructive response. You have to do that, and part of that comes from you breaking down the poem itself. So contrapuntal. So remember, you need to refer back to your notes in order to figure out um, a deeper meaning. I'm just going to go into my downloads really quickly. I don't. Okay, so I found the reading here. Okay, I thought I found the reading. Here we go. So here's the reading that I'm asking you to do before. You just need to be sure you read to page 3. And if you come up here, excuse me, to page 4, you'll get some information that you need in order to understand the second part of the poem. Achoo, excuse me. What I'm most interested in is, um, oh yeah, okay. So if you go to this page 4, you'll get some background information that will help you understand it. So I wanted to be sure that I showed that to you all. But if you look in your notes, you get a great definition of what contrapuntal means. It means kind of shares the same meaning with counterpoint. But what I want us to understand is that Marguerite, this symbol of German beauty, of womanhood, of motherhood, and the Shulamite woman or Shulamith. Here we have a woman named Shulamith who is also symbolic of Jewish beauty, but becomes symbolic of the death of Jewish culture, family, motherhood, are presented as counterpoints to each other. So this is the contrapuntal point in the fugue that he's writing. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually talk about my answer. So literally, here's my answer. I'll zoom in just a little bit. And I'm merely responding to the question here. That's really all I'm doing. How does Paul Celan use a specific literary device to build a theme in the poem Death Fugue? So all I'm really asking you to do is respond. If you are honors, you must have 2 literary devices, not just one. Okay. So I have Paul Celan uses repetition to emphasize the themes of death and loss many Jews in concentration camp many Jews in concentration camp prisoners experienced during the Holocaust. Where did I get this? Oh, okay. Good question, Miss. Good question. Um, here. So as I was moving along, I've literally marked in my text where I see it. We have repetition here,